I'm Kris Sims, and this is the Canadian Taxpayers podcast. We're dedicated to lower taxes, less waste, and more accountable government. On this episode, we have a special interview for you, and we're going to focus on government accountability, specifically First Nations government accountability. Our guest is Rob Louie, and is he ever a fighter? He is starting his own organization that fights for accountability and transparency and provides legal advice to folks who want the same thing at their local First Nation government levels. So why is Rob doing this? Well, it kind of runs in his family. You see, a few years back, his uncle, now departed, Wayne Louie, wanted some financial accountability from his local band office. That's in the Lower Kootenay Band area around the town of Creston, British Columbia. Turns out Chief and Council weren't so forthcoming with their information. So they actually had to go to court. This is where it gets super interesting because it quickly turned into somewhat of a David and Goliath battle. You see, while apparently Chief and Council were taking expensive flights to Vancouver for their court date, Uncle Wayne jumped on the bus and packed himself a lunch. The good part is that Uncle Wayne won. He eventually did get the financial accountability and the documents that he was looking for. So fast forward a few years until now. Why is his nephew, Rob Louie, picking up this fight? Well, it comes down to fairness and accountability. You see, for folks who don't live within First Nations government areas, if you have trouble with your local government, you can raise hell in a good way. You can file freedom of information requests. You can call the media. You can demand accountability from your local town hall. Well, unfortunately, in some very rare instances, at local First Nations levels, whistleblowers don't get treated so well. In fact, sometimes when people start asking uncomfortable questions about where money is going, they get punished. We here at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we've gotten phone calls from whistleblowing folks on First Nations governed land who say things like, I tried speaking up and I tried asking questions and now I don't have any firewood for the winter. What am I going to do? Or I've been evicted because I was asking questions of my local government. That's not right, and that's not fair, and that's not accountable. So why is Rob Louie picking up this fight? Let's find out.
So prior to the Band Members Alliance and Advocacy Association of Canada, or BMAC for short, the late Wayne Louie from the Lower Kootenay Band was a former chief in the 1990s of Lower Kootenay, and he held a position in the community as a leader. So as he would say, you don't need to be elected to be a leader, and he certainly demonstrated that by his actions and his words. So Wayne Louie had his claim to fame was the Louie versus Louie court case. Louie versus Louie is a BC Court of Appeal case in 2015. And as you may know, the Court of Appeal is actually higher than the Supreme Court in terms of authority. So this is BC's top court that rendered a decision in June 3rd, 2015 on a matter involving band money, band counselors, and band members all in the mix. Wayne Louie was the plaintiff and went on to be the appellant in the Louie versus Louie court case.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about the details of that case? I remember you telling me a really poignant story. It really sounded like David and Goliath kind of a situation where your uncle was asking for accountability and transparency from the First Nations band government, and that he took the bus all the way out to Vancouver, packed himself a ham sandwich, whereas band leadership were apparently taking the more expensive route there. Can you describe that to us a little bit?
Yes, that was definitely a classic David and Goliath situation. What left a lot of people to wonder is how did a fella nearing his elderly years, that being Wayne Louie, who lived on trapping money, really with no income, able to get to the BC's highest court and win with a legal firm backing him. And here's some of the details that Wayne Louie was a spiritual man, and he did practice our spiritual ways, that being the sweat lodge, the smudge, and he used it not to as a battle against chief and council. Rather, this was for the common good. His medicine was good. His energy was proper and positive, and this was really about stopping the damage that was going on at Lower Kootenay. And we feel that we don't have any evidence of this, but we feel that this Louie versus Louie is really just a tip of the iceberg. And really, we just want to set a precedent that chief and council do not have the authority to unilaterally award themselves a bonus out of band money. And if we didn't do this, a precedent would have been set the other way. That would have been okay for chief and council to continue to award themselves bonuses to the exclusion of the members. So Wayne Louie had me in his corner. I'm a UBC law graduate. I used to work at a criminal defense firm, and I'm actually quite open about my past substance abuse issues that I have since rectified. I'm a proud member of the recovery community.
Good and for you, man.
These days I give back to the recovery community and to the legal community in a way where I'm helping some Aboriginal law students whose names remain confidential, but that are struggling with substance abuse. That kind of help wasn't around back when I was in law school. So I helped basically quarterback the trial, the preparation for it, and I called on a few legal peers. And Mary McCulley is a lawyer in Vancouver, a very renowned lawyer, who, when she looked at the facts of this, she said, this isn't a case where this isn't about me making a profit. This is rather just about doing the right thing. And this is a case that calls out for some justice. And she saw the merit in this case. And there was a prima facie breach of fiduciary duty. And she said, it'll be interesting to see how they're going to justify awarding themselves this money. And so Mary McCulley became counsel of record, and we were off to the trial. The band council immediately used band funds, band resources, band staff, to defend themselves, and the band council was the defendant. Now, we had a few pedestrians that were also defense because they were on the band council back in 2009 when this happened. I don't have to say it allegedly happened. It's been proven that the transaction where they awarded themselves money happened. So the other part of it is, like any community, a smaller community like ours, family is involved. This wasn't a case. I mean, we didn't wake up every day thinking like, hooray, we get to go head to head with our immediate family. But this was more about, again, just setting the precedent, setting the tone that this is not right. This is not legally right. This is not morally right. So we went to trial, and wouldn't you know it, we lost. And that's what some people actually forget, that we actually lost the trial. And I remember hearing some band members cry on the phone. It was heartbreaking. The decision was a real head scratcher because the judge ruled that basically the band council has the authority to do this. Like, it does almost like giving the band council sovereignty over band money. They can do what they want. And Mary and I, after we reviewed the decision, both agreed that this needs to be appealed. And again, it wasn't about, she wasn't saying, okay, now you have to, pay $10,000, $50,000 before we appeal. She was already preparing the appeal. And she said, we'll worry about the money later. We did win on the Court of Appeal. It was a unanimous decision. All three judges agreed with us that the band council did not have the authority to take that money in the first place. When it came to cost, there was some negotiation. They started at one end, we started at the other. We met in the middle ground. It is public record that it was $15,000 court costs, which if anybody knows anything about litigation, that's very low.
It is.
So yeah, and again, that went to Mary McCulley. And again, this was not about her making money. She knew that this was more about a pro bono case where it just needed to be fought. And what do you know, we set some really good law.
So since then, that was back in 2015, and it must have been quite the incredible feeling to actually win that on appeal. Since then, have things improved? Has this truly been precedent setting in practice?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This case remained divisive in our community for a few years subsequent. But I think both sides recognized that something positive came out of this, that it's no longer a gray area if they can take money or not. And I'm quick to add that, chief and council do work hard. And, they do deserve to be compensated properly. But going in camera and paying themselves, this arbitrary amount to the exclusion of everybody else on a compensation fund that was supposed to be for the benefit of all was not the way to do it. Today, I do have a good relationship with the council. My father, Robert Louie Sr., who was Wayne Louie's brother, was on our side during this case, is also on the band council. I should add that Wayne Louie ran 2 years ago for the band council and was nominated to the council. However, as it turned out, my father and Wayne Louie received the same number of votes, and one of them had to step down.
Oh, wow. Did they arm wrestle? How'd they do that?
Yeah.
I'm just picturing two brothers right now who are trying to get this council.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a bonus. I mean, I was the campaign manager, so it wasn't, the identical number of votes isn't a coincidence because, I made sure that those members that said they were going to vote for him voted for them.
Yeah.
And basically, rest in peace, Wayne Louie. But I remember him saying, I'm not a backbencher. I want to be the chief again. So he said, Robert, you can have the councillor position.
Nice.
Yeah.
have fun, man. All right.
Yeah.
So after that, then was this big fight that you had successfully conducted? Was this the inspiration for BMAC? I mean, you and I have been talking over the last few years. You've put so much work into this. This is not something that somebody takes on lightly. Were you inspired by what happened at your local community level here?
Yes. Well, I mean, you said it perfectly. This was a big inspiration for the Little Kootenai Band. And then it started to trickle out to my nation. And what I found is that I was receiving calls from right across Canada about the Louie versus Louie, not only from the legal community, from those lawyers that practice Aboriginal law, but primarily from band members, some chiefs, some councillors. And I thought, hey, whoa, I mean, what happened here in Louie versus Louie in the small town of Creston is happening elsewhere. And this was a real wake-up call for bands across Canada, that for two reasons. One, that, wow, there's a band member that actually stood up and put a stop to the mistakes being made at the council level with respect to money. And two, that it could be done elsewhere. So, there's other band members that have said, we have the same situation. How do we do this? What did you do? And it went from informal conversations to formalizing the next steps. And here's where my recovery comes into it. It's during Louie versus Louie, I was still drinking. And it's kind of funny, I can laugh at it now, but I was having a few drinks when I was doing some legal research on it. And what do you know, we still won. And I thought, if I can have that, that kind of energy and, for lack of better words, like talent to do that, I could, do it the other way. And so I had a spiritual awakening just over 2 years ago, where recovery was the answer. And I had some help, and I'm still getting a little bit of help from the Lawyers Assistance Program to give back to the people. And, some may say that's cliche. Well, I'm saying, well, it's in practice, because BMAC is my way of giving back. And I've been giving back through a federally registered nonprofit organization called the Band Members Alliance and Advocacy Association of Canada. So now all I've done is connect some dots. I've used the vehicle as BMAC. The legal community is it's like the force behind BMAC, and I'm the one that's kind of orchestrating and organizing the things for band members, because right now I find that there's band members that want to do the same thing they did in Louie versus Louie, but they don't know how to get there, and it's through BMAC that they're finding that answer.
I must say, man, I'm no stranger to substance addiction. Some of my closest and most beloved family members have struggled with this, and it is one thing to get yourself on track and to discipline yourself. And I deeply admire my family members who have done that. It's a whole nother world to reach out to others in order to help get themselves on track and to help them in this way, to bring accountability and justice and transparency to their local communities. That's big league stuff, man. I gotta say. So good on you. So
thanks, Kris.
I mean it. So say I'm someone who's First Nations and I'm struggling with my local government and I want to see them post their financials online, or I want to know why they've spent X amount of dollars on Z, something like that, and I'm getting nowhere. If I phone you and if I try to get you on side to help me, walk us through that process. What does BMAC do for folks in that situation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, and I do get that from time to time. So here's a typical situation. We have a website. It's bmac.org. That's bmaac.org. And there's a spot on our website where you can actually type in, like, what's the problem? And it gets to me. It gets to me generally, like directly. And from there, I see every message that comes in. I would say since September of last year, 2020, there's probably well over 500 messages that's come into BMAC.
Whoa.
Every week, there is a BMAC issue. I'm reaching out, getting back to people. People are contacting me, and I do this voluntarily. And I need to underscore that, because for me, my income is going to come by practicing law again, which I am proud to say at the end of this month on the 28th, we'll be in Vancouver to hand deliver my application to the Law Society. I have one of Vancouver's top criminal defense lawyer, Tony Legiment, who has hired me on. He's signing my papers to the Law Society, and I'll be off to the races very short time here. So I'm very, very happy to be back. I mean, recovery's given me everything. And this BMAC is just one thing among many. So what I do is I look at the situation, and it either falls under BMAC's mandate or it doesn't. And BMAC's mandate I've kept it general in that it's there to help band members get access to justice, to hold their chief and counsel accountable. Now, what kind of accountability? Typically, it is around band finances, where either a chief and counsel are pulling a Louie versus Louie, or they are denying band members a benefit that they are otherwise entitled to. We have expanded to include election issues. So the BMAC was in the federal court recently in a case known as Bertrand. We were interveners, and we said that the federal government did not have the power to give band councils the ability to postpone their time in office past their fixed election date. And secondly, that if the band council wanted to extend their time in office, they had to consult with the members at the very least. The court didn't deal with that second part because they found the first part to be unlawful. So they agreed with us that the feds did not have that power in the first place. The federal government, wouldn't you know it, has issued an appeal. So we're heading to the Court of Appeal on this. But here's the thing. If it looks like we can help a band member, then what I'll do is I always reply to everybody, but I'll ask if what their available schedule is, and I'll ask if they'd like to have a phone call or a Zoom, and we'll discuss the matter further. From there, if it looks like there is, on the face of it, a problem where BMAC's assistance or representation would be helpful to resolve the issue, then I'll contact one of the law firms that's been working with BMAC. So that's the way it goes. And here's one quick example. Sometimes I'll get calls from a band member saying the chief and the band manager are having an affair, Rob, and there's, and all these, they're driving around in the new truck. Well,
I get the new truck calls a lot too here. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that starting point is, we're not relationship advisors. But if it looks like, the chief, dipped into the Jordan's principal money and has purchased himself a truck, then that's, on the face of it, something that gets our attention, and then we have further discussions.
Now, First Nations folks across Canada, it's a diverse group of people. They come from all walks of life, different income levels, education levels. They can be on reserve, off reserve, rural, urban, like you name it. Do any of those factors play into whether or not you can help them? Can you only help folks who are currently on reserve, or how does that work?
Another good question. So, we're sensitive to the diversity of First Nation issues, and we do not tread at all into cultural backgrounds, hereditary chief versus Indian chief. We find our common ground around accountability, or when there's a lack of it. And so if a person lives on reserve, off reserve, BC or Nova Scotia, if the issues tend to be the same, it's that chief and council tend to think they are above the law, and they're untouchable. And it's been like that for decades. And those that actually had the impetus to step up and challenge chief and council are usually met with resistance, if not outright being ignored. And those special and talented band members that have the wherewithal to push it a little further will find that chief and council will lawyer up using band money to push back and silence those band members. And with BMAC, now those days are gone. That the band members have somebody to call, and that's BMAC.
Wow.
And now we push back.
That's a big deal. As you know, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we've been working on some of these cases now for a long time. But to your point on how many messages you've gotten just since September, trying to manage all of the calls that we get, it can get pretty overwhelming. Of course, you're familiar with the Charmaine Stick case. She's a hardworking lady. She lives in a First Nations band right on the border of Saskatchewan there. And all she was asking for was publicization of spending at her band council. She wanted it posted in the same spirit of the First Nations Financial Transparency Act. And so we've been going in and out of the courts on her behalf as well, helping her to fight. It sounds like you're fighting along those same lines of accountability is accountability. Transparency is transparency. When it comes down to it, the reason why we supported the First Nations Financial Transparency Act is because folks living on reserve deserve the same amount of transparency and accountability as any Canadian living in any small town or big city. Do you kind of have that same feeling?
Yeah, and I'll start off by answering it this way. You mentioned Wayne Louie. One of his famous quotes was, the chief flew in using on the band's dime, dining out using the band funds, and I'm taking the bus, and I had to pack a lunch. There's something wrong with that picture. I love that summed it up perfectly.
It really does.
Yeah, and so we do have some common ground here, and I mean, really, how hard is it just to say, hey guys, I made 50,000, 100,000. I find that band members invariably don't have a problem with somebody making money, especially if they're working hard, and they should be paid well. I certainly don't have a problem with that. The problem is when there's all this secrecy Like it's like, bands are being run like the mafia. And if anybody speaks out, you're going to get whacked. And,
Yes.
people get whacked in the sense that they lose their job, they're denied a benefit, and it gets pretty ugly fast. And so people are fearful. And here's the thing, Kris, with BMAC, we rely a lot on membership. So when somebody signs up to be a member, that money, that $40 membership fee goes towards expenses. Now, a lot of the people, I was wondering, like, why aren't they like signing up? And I got feedback from 3 different provinces from band members in those provinces saying, we're scared, Rob, because we want to become a member, but if chief and council find out, we're going to be in trouble. And so I had to go back to the drawing board. And I thought, oh, okay. So now when somebody becomes a member of BMAC, that's confidential. We thank them for being members, but I don't publicize that.
Yes.
And, that's the reality that we live in.
It is. And like, here, for example, we need whistleblower legislation to protect people. And also, not everybody needs to know who's helping each other out when it comes to advocacy and transparency. But can you get into that a little bit for us? I think some folks who haven't experienced this, who haven't lived either right next to folks who live on reserve, who haven't had experience with band council, when you talk about how things can get ugly fast, okay? So say you're living in a big metropolitan urban center and you have a beef with the mayor or a city councilor. Your garbage is still going to get picked up. You're still going to have water going to your house. You're not going to be denied city services. And if you were, there'd be a lot of hell to pay really fast. But we've gotten calls. I personally have gotten calls from folks who are living on First Nations reserves who say the same thing you just said of, I want to do this. I want to get that. We need accountability here. And then I say, fine, can you speak to me and go on record? And that's when things stop because they're scared. And so I started asking, well, what are you exactly worried about? What kind of repercussions? One older gentleman actually told me that he was being denied firewood for his wood stove. Like firewood distribution, warmth in the winter. Can you describe some of that for us? What sorts of repercussions do happen to some of these folks?
Yes. Well, obviously, I'm going to keep names out of it because
for sure.
For confidentiality issues. Here again, just let me start with the analogy, and I'll answer the question in a more fulsome way. In the Bertrand case that was recently argued, counsel said to the judge during closing submissions, imagine, if you will, that the federal health minister said to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau during these times of pandemic, do you want to stay in office for another half a year? Okay, don't worry about it. I'll give you some regulation. You can stay in. You don't have to tell Canadian citizens. You don't have to tell members of parliament. I'll give you that special power. Imagine the backlash, the outrage that would be taking place. They would have lawyers, NGOs, all walks of life lining up to file in court to say, hang on, not so fast. And that's what basically was happening in the Bertrand case with bands right across Canada. We have, the Indigenous Services Canada telling band councils, hey, you want to stay in office during a pandemic? Don't worry about it. We'll give you some legislation. Don't worry about the band members. It's only their rights that are at stake. And of course, I'm being a bit facetious here. No. But I think your audience will get the point with that. So when it comes to retribution, let's just call it what it is, that takes place in reserves across Canada, that you don't even have to live on reserve to face retribution. You just have to be a member. Because here's the thing, whether you live in the city, like urban or not, and you're a band member, you're still connected to the community. And if you're relying on, for example, tuition, and you're a student going to university, and you or one of your family members speaks out against the chief, your tuition is cut like that. If you live on reserve and you speak out or you ask questions, especially around finances, well, don't be too surprised if you get a letter saying that you're being evicted. And here's another example that I often hear. Again, asking the questions, or just basically, having a concern about the way things are going, that your check, whether it's social assistance or your regular paycheck, well, guess what? It was forgot to be signed. oh, we can't find it. Come back tomorrow. Tomorrow's a Saturday, so you have to come back on Monday. It's these kind of things, these repercussions that people face uh, as paybacks for challenging chief and council. And you're right. The firewood analogy, I've heard that too.
I think a lot of folks who don't have experience living either on reserve themselves or don't have friends and family who do, they'd be pretty surprised with the word eviction. So, for example, could just walk us through this. Talk to me like I'm six. Can
Sure.
a chief and/or band council kick someone out of their home? And if so, how?
BMAC was involved recently with an elder from the Stoney tribe in southern Alberta. This is in the local or in the media. Google the name Rhonda Kakowitz. Kakowitz spelled Kaquitts. The Chiniki chief and council evicted her. They tried to evict her in 2008, right after her husband passed away. Well, who was behind the eviction? It was, ironically, the housing manager that wanted her house. The housing manager is her brother-in-law. Now, 10 years go by, don't hear a peep. In November of 2018, the chief and council again at Chiniki issued another eviction letter towards her. And this time she contacted me. Now, BMAC wasn't in existence yet, but it was in the makings. And that's when I contacted Andrew Wilson, a lawyer in Calgary, and said, Andrew, this is what we've got. Well, let's get into the federal court and let's have a judge decide if it's valid or not. Long story short, in February of 2 months ago, the Chiniki band got a court order to eject her from her house. And the reason why is because the Indian Act, that federal legislation, gives all the power to chief and council. It's not like living off reserve, where at least there's a residential tenancy branch that you can go to. There's nothing like that exists in any reserve in Canada. There's no legislation like a provincial residential tenancy act. And now Rhonda, the poor dear, is now living with her daughter and her, I think, 8 others in a 2-bedroom house.
Wow.
And that house that Rhonda used to live in with her husband for 10, 15, 20 years is now the housing manager's second house.
I think a lot of Canadians who aren't First Nations have learned a lot just by what you just said. So that's a big time thing. Let's leave on a happy note. I know that there are so many different Indigenous languages and First Nations languages from coast to coast to coast. It's one of the things I find most fascinating is the linguistics element of it. So I got to ask, are any other languages other than English spoken at the office? Do you somehow try to accommodate that when you're answering the phones? Is there any way that you're helping to incorporate that?
Tanse, okay, ani, wake, dalawande, yotes, hadi, OCM, digiso kyukiet. That's hello in, let me backtrack, in Cree, Blackfoot, Ojibwe, Shuswap, Haisla, Simshan, Carrier, and Coast Salish, and the last one was my own language, Kootenai or Dunacha. Giso Kyukiet means hello.
That is awesome. And Kootenai,
so,
we were talking about this a while ago. Yours is a language isolate, correct?
It is, and sadly, it is on the verge of extinction in my community. In the Lower Kootenai Band, there are, I think I can count on one hand now, the number of fluent speakers left, and they're all over the age of 70.
Well, let's hope we can turn that around here in my local hometown. My children are learning Hulkamelam in their local public school, which is pretty remarkable. I went to the same school and I didn't learn anything. They're learning it, which just gives me goosebumps. It makes me so happy. Rob, I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I hope that others did too. If we're speaking to somebody right now whose light bulb is going off saying, whoa, here's some hope, I want to reach out, how do they do that?
Yes. Well, we would hope, and by the way, the BMAC is open, its membership is open to the general public, to anyone that wants to get behind this. Yes, we hold chief and council accountable, but we are more towards getting to the solution. So membership fees are help provide for mediation. Sometimes a letter from one of our lawyers will resolve the situation like that. So every little bit helps. And if your audience wants to get behind BMAC, it'd be much appreciated. I think this is one way of reconciliation. We have all sides coming towards something that they can get behind, and BMAC is, I think, that vehicle, the way to do it.
Awesome. This is one of the best conversations I've had in a long time, my friend. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hajka.